This week, we are traveling to the Split Rock Lighthouse with lightkeeper Hayes Scriven. You are listening to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 22 of the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Albert. This week, I am joined by fellow landscape photographer Hayes Scriven, the keeper of the famous Split Rock State Park Lighthouse on Minnesota's beautiful North Shore. In this episode, Hayes shares his experience as a keeper of one of the most iconic lighthouses in the Great Lakes and some of the history behind this incredible location. An astrophotographer and landscape photographer as well, Hayes shares some of his favorite aspects of the lighthouse from a photographer's point of view, and some of the challenges and victories he has experienced as an astrophotographer on the North Shore. As always, links to all of his work are included in the show notes below. Head over to his links, give him a follow, as you enjoy this week's discussion with Hayes Scriven.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick. And as you said, my name is Hayes. I'm the site manager here at Split Rock Lighthouse. I've been here now for since 2019, so this is like my fifth full year here. Kind of going through, and my day job, I do this, and I basically manage the day-to-day operations of the lighthouse. And so, for those that are a little familiar with Split Rock, and for those that don't know, we are a very busy site here. We see anywhere between 150 and 160,000 guests a year. So my day-to-day job is a lot of managing people and training staff and getting everybody kind of up to speed on how we need to interact with our guests and make sure they're having a good time. Because, like I said, it's a very popular site, and it's means a lot to the state of Minnesota and to the region, and so we take that pretty seriously. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a dream job. It's part of my thing that as I work here, I also live on site. So it's kind of I always call that the perk of the job. I get to be here, stay in one of the keepers' houses, and kind of live like a old timey lighthouse keeper every once in a while. Get to experience all the ups and downs of living in a historic site, little building, and all that fun stuff. So it's definitely different than your average average living situation for a lot of people. It's fun. And I got into photography during COVID. Like, I know a lot of people had to find some stuff to do to kind of get out and keep themselves sane, and that's kind of what I did. Always kind of had this creative spark. I guess I thought that I had in high school. At least I thought I had it in high school, and then I got a job and married, and kind of went away because I was in museum work and I had to be creative in other ways. The photography thing just kind of clicked, and so since then I've kind of taken off on this, focusing on the landscape of the North Shore of Minnesota and other places in northern Minnesota, but really diving deep into the astrophotography. So a lot of the nightscapes is kind of been really focusing a lot on that more this last year and a half, really trying to document the night sky that's around us, because we have some great dark skies here along the North Shore. It's just great to see it, and want to help to try to educate people on why they're important and how we can preserve them, and just really show off the cool stuff that you don't get always to see when you're sleeping in your bed.
The dark skies up there are incredible. I've been up there and seen them on a few occasions. I've visited the Split Rock Lighthouse on a few separate occasions as well. My first time actually being October, I want to say it was 2017 or 2018. And it's just, like you said, it's beautiful. It's a historical place. The night skies are phenomenal. The landscape is incredible. And I've seen some of your recent posts as well, where you're shooting from down, I don't know if you guys consider that a bay in front of Split Rock, but there's that lower peninsula there that you guys shoot the lighthouse from and include the Milky Way. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's that was so that earlier this Milky Way season, I believe that was in March. The Milky Way core lines up really nicely with the lighthouse there, and I'd actually never gotten a shot from there that I liked. Um, so a friend of mine and I went out. We were trying to get this front on shot, and it is just spectacular when everything lines up and you can look up and see these millions of stars above you. And I've really in the last year and a half, because I've kind of got into doing some workshops as well on the side. Um, so I've been really focusing a lot more around the state park here in finding different compositions and stuff for everybody. And really, the Split Rock State Park is probably one of the best state parks in Minnesota for night sky photography, because you can see the Milky Way, all season. You've got the amazing dark skies, but then it there's interesting comps as the months move along. So, as you start in February or March, you've got one area where you can really focus in on, and then as April and May, it kind of goes into a different area. And there's just other parts of the park that people don't even realize, that don't include the lighthouse, crazy enough, that are really interesting comps. And I've been about 2 weeks ago, I was just down in another part of the park. And, if you like Lake Superior, compositions, and I always call it big sky, big lake kind of a thing. It's absolutely perfect for that. So it's been great.
Yeah. Another thing that actually came to mind as you were saying that was the Northern Lights images as well, not just Milky Way. I mean, of course, as we all know here in the Great Lakes, Northern Lights is a lot more difficult to predict and line up perfectly. Sometimes we get really lucky, but there's been a lot of really cool shots of the lighthouse with the lights and the shoreline right there at Split Rock Park, or excuse me, Split Rock State Park, and just all kinds of really neat compositions and photo opportunities over there.
Yeah, the North Shore is a great location for Northern Lights. It's not the best actually along the shore because it doesn't face directly north, so you're facing like a northeast way. But it is a great spot because there's so much public land that people can access, and the state parks are really cooperative with, people being out there after hours at late. They do ask if you're able to tell them to say, hey, I'm going to be in the park late, as long as you're not being loud, that kind of stuff. But it is the all the state parks are great for Northern Lights here, and there's a lot of great places inland as well. But yeah, the predicting here, in northern Minnesota, we're pretty far north, but we're not, Canada North or Fairbanks, Alaska North, where you can more easily predict them. You got to wait and wait. This last weekend was a great example of that. We had all these big CMEs coming in, and really there was only like 1.5 days where there was a good opportunity for good viewing. And you have to take a lot into account with what space weather's doing, but then also locally, we've had really bad fire smoke here in northern Minnesota, and it's been so bad that you can't even see the blue sky during the day, and it's really obscured the night skies. And so it's been a real rough, 2 weeks here for that, but there is a lot that goes into making the perfect aurora shot come out.
Yeah. I actually last year on the May 10th event, I was determined to make it to Split Rock, and I made it like 80% of the way there. Right as the sun had set, I saw pillars and everything in the sky. I was somewhere northern Wisconsin outside of Superior, and I was just like, I'm starting here and I'm just going wherever the night takes me. I did eventually make it into Minnesota, but not that far north. And it's incredible when all the pieces come together. It's an incredible place. I mean, even without astrophotography and the Milky Way and Northern Lights, I mean, the lighthouse itself, like you mentioned earlier, the history, the preserving it, and your role there, that's all awesome, exciting stuff. What are some of the parts of your job that you consider your favorites?
I have a really great team that I work with. So, my working with the staff that I have that's so motivated to making sure that guests are having a good experience when they're here, when they're, and then the dedication to the site itself. So making sure that we're preserving it for the future. long-term use for all of Minnesota and the Midwest and everybody. Um, that staff part is really amazing. But it's interacting with the guests after they've had a great tour experience, or if they've had uh, a self-guided experience, and just talking to them and finding out what they really enjoyed, and finding out that they've learned something new, or they've got a new appreciation for the lighthouse itself. That those are really rewarding for me, because a lot of people in their job, they a lot of times they have a hard time finding that it's being valued by a lot of people, that it's meaning a lot to them. And this job is very rewarding in that sense, that we're making a difference in people's lives when people are visiting here. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and part of our mission when we're delivering program to people, is that we want to try to provide magic for people, because the world today needs a lot more magic in it. And I'm stealing that quote from a book that I read from, but it really sang with me, because people are trying to find ways to escape and learn different things, and us, here at Split Rock and the Minnesota Historical Society, like, we need to do that for people. We want to provide those magical moments for people. Knowing that we're making that difference for people is so great. Um, and so, yeah, that's probably the part that I like the most about it, is just seeing those interactions, how people respond to what we're producing for them, and providing that escape for them. But also, because I'm a history nerd, like, I get to see a lot of really cool things. Like, we're doing a really big construction project right now, where we're updating all of the trails and the landscape around the lighthouse to be more accessible friendly. Um, One of the things that I've just absolutely just been like geeking out about consistently is all the stuff that they're finding, um, when we're moving stuff around and digging the earth up. One of the things that we've found even before we started the actual project was, we were trying to do some surveying of the site. We had always known kind of the rough idea where the hoist and derrick was for the site. And the hoist and derrick is a system, a crane system essentially, that brought up all the supplies when they were building the lighthouse in 1910. And it sat on the edge of the cliff, and it's a 120-foot cliff. And it was this massive crane structure. And they took it down a few years after the lighthouse was built, because they didn't need it anymore. But we never had an exact location, because it wasn't a permanent structure. Well, in the preparation for this project, we found a footing for it, where they actually cut into the rock and made these 90-degree turns. And we saw the rebar that was sticking in there. So they did a lot to prepare and build that spot, and we'd never seen it before. And so now, as historians, we get this opportunity now to interpret that for people, and people can actually see where this piece that actually helped and was extremely essential in building the lighthouse, where it was. And we can talk more about it in a more powerful and impactful way, because people can have something to actually tie it to.
Now, is that being preserved in the renovations and updates? Are you guys leaving that foundation and footing there so that people can see it?
Yeah, so the idea is that we're leaving it there. It's carved right in the rock face, so it's definitely not gonna it's definitely not going. We don't have to worry about it. Um, but what's happening with the project is, we've been part of it was, we wanted to add this new overlook viewing point to the lighthouse, and the new overlook goes along the old tramway path, and that tramway path takes us to a point where we can see that footing and that foundation. And so a lot of people might think, well, that's not cool. You're just talking about a foundation. But when you put it in context of the rest of the lighthouse and how integral it was to the building of it, and you can see how close it was to the edge, and now people will get a better sense too of, okay, they were using this hoist and derrick to lift all of the materials up for the lighthouse. They're doing this from the boat, because there was no road here. And one guy's job was to go over the edge of the cliff, and there was these bars that were secured into the rock face, and basically go out over the cliff edge, hold onto this bar, and look over the edge, and make sure that he could see the supplies coming up. Well, now we have that footing for the hoist, but people can also get a better sense, and they see those exact bars that guy was using, because those are still there too. So when you put it in that kind of context, you're like, yeah, that is actually kind of neat then.
That's really cool. I mean, could you imagine the
Oh,
adrenaline rush hanging onto a bar and standing there looking over that cliff?
the really cool part is we've got a picture to go with it too. So we can tie all that together where the boat's down below and there's a guy holding onto a railing with a rope tied to him and he's looking over the cliff face. We're like, yeah, you're crazy.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, count me out. That before OSHA, probably
Oh, yeah.
no harness, no nothing, just
Nothing.
free dangling, free climbing on
Yep.
the edge there.
Yep. No, it's crazy. So yeah, like that piece of it's really cool just to be part of an organization that is able to uncover history on a daily basis like that all the time, and be able to be a part of it and live in it is probably my favorite part.
That's really cool. I really like how you tied the history and the preservation and all that together, and the hoist. That's just awesome in and of itself. Like being there and uncovering that, it's like l- quite literally like archaeology. You're digging up bits of the past, and I mean, it makes me wonder, did you guys find anything else like old tools, bottles, anything
Oh,
like
yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah, we're constantly finding stuff. Through the process, we've also been able to confirm where the original tramway was that went through the site as well, because we found, as they were peeling back some asphalt, they found a sidewalk that was there that they just put the asphalt on top of. It was an original sidewalk from 1910 as well, um, that had been sitting there for the last 100 some years, not disturbed and covered up, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we get to do a lot of cool stuff like that, and I'm hanging out with a lot of cool people lately because we're doing active archaeology right now as they're doing the construction project. So as they're finding stuff as a team, they're like, oh, this is really cool, and it really helps broaden my education about the study of history, and more of what goes into coming up with the solid base for the stuff that we're trying to preserve and interpret to people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine you guys are collecting all kinds of different stuff and including it in the museum there itself. I mean, the lighthouse itself is 115 years old. If it was built in 1910, when was it decommissioned as an actual functioning lighthouse or in use? It's still functional, but
Yeah, is the Coast Guard term is a active aid to navigation, um, and it stopped functioning as an active aid in 1969. The Coast Guard, because of the development of radar and other navigational aids, really deemed the lighthouse not sufficient to the shipping industry anymore, because they had radar and better sonar and that kind of stuff to do it. Because our lighthouse, we weren't marking like a shoal or reefs or anything like that in Michigan. But where Lake Michigan has all these shoals and reefs and stuff, and here it was mainly just to be a bearing light station for when the ships came around the UP there and Apostle Islands, because they couldn't see the light in Duluth, essentially the light station in Duluth, or in Two Harbors, and we were a bearing station. So if they saw that flash, they're like, oh, yep, I'm near Split Rock, and it's roughly 17 miles out or something like that. Um, and then the other thing that they did need the station for, and it's because of why northern Minnesota was mined as much as it was, is there's a lot of rare minerals in the ground, and the the compass navigation could be off anywhere between 5 and 15 degrees.
oh wow.
And so if you didn't know where you're at and you couldn't see the lighthouse or hear the fog signal, like that's why you needed a lighthouse there at some point. But when the technology got better, they didn't need it.
Definitely don't want to be 15 degrees off on your bearing when you're in a giant ship, especially along that rocky shoreline out there. That's dangerous stuff, but that's really cool all the same. I mean, it's history, how it all comes together and how you guys are still learning about it is amazing. Of all of the history that you know of, what's your favorite historical fact about the lighthouse?
I do always kind of tend to go back to um, the construction of it, but what I've really come to appreciate more recently too is understanding like the Fresnel lens and how important those were to lighthouses and how they worked. It was kind of a uh, neat setup, but for us here, and it's still an ongoing thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily historical, but our lighthouse sat on a mercury float system essentially, and so think of it when you see these big Fresnel lenses, they're big glass pieces of art essentially that would shoot out the light, X amount of miles over the lake or whatever they're trying to do. Um, our system itself weighs over 1,600 pounds, just the very top part of it. And that sits on a mercury float. And for people that understand what mercury is and how it works, it's a very dense liquid metal essentially. So it's displacing that weight really well. And it would cause a frictionless, circle as well for it to rotate around on it. Um, so Split Rock had that mercury float, and a lot of light stations were using mercury back then as that way because they didn't understand the, the dangers associated with it necessarily. They just knew it was a really good thing. But here at Split Rock, we still have that mercury float, and to the best of our knowledge, we're the only light station in North America that still actively uses mercury in our float system like that. We haven't switched over to a gear system or motor system that works it. So I think that's probably my favorite little factoid, I guess, about the lighthouse.
That's incredible. I had no idea that that was even something that would be used, but that makes perfect sense. As you were explaining what it was, I was like, yeah, it's a super dense liquid, but it's still a liquid, frictionless. That makes sense for something that's got to sit up there and rotate, for God knows how long.
And it's displacing all that weight too, and it does it so fluid. It's just so seamless that you can push it with two hands or two fingers, I should say. When the lens is going around. So the engineering feat behind the lighthouse and really in any lighthouse, specifically a lot of the ones on the Great Lakes, I've just been really impressed with. These engineers that were building these stations out here in these remote locations is just mind-boggling to me how they did it.
Yeah. When you actually look at the craftsmanship and what they created with the tools of the time, which of course today, yeah, sure, we can do it, but thinking, hey, they didn't have access to all this stuff that makes building things so much easier today. It's impressive, the craftsmanship and the attention to detail and everything that really went into this stuff.
Yeah. And like for Split Rock, and I always joke about this now, is we can build pretty much anything in today's world. Um, but back then they built Split Rock and they built it ahead of schedule and under budget. When was the last time you ever heard those words in a construction project? So
Yeah, not in the, not in anything I can think of in the last 2 decades at least.
yeah.
Now, I understand you guys relight the lighthouse. Is it once a year, twice a year? I've seen posts about it where you guys turn it on for the anniversary.
Yeah, so we in a normal year, I'll say, we kind of got into this nice routine of lighting the beacon um, about 3 times a year, and that's expanded from in the past. And what we started doing was in May, we had kind of this event where we wanted to open up the lighthouse grounds for our North Shore community friends and neighbors and say, hey, come up to the lighthouse and we'll have food and games and just a great time to hang out, and we'll turn the beacon on. And then in July, we'd kind of always had the beacon on July 31st, um, but it was never really marketed as such. And um, me being who I am, I wanted to kind of open that up more for people as well. And the reason that we do it on that day is that the beacon was first turned on July 31st, 1910. So it's kind of our own anniversary. Um, we kind of affectionately call it our birthday party. So we do it on our birthday here. Um, and then every year for the last 40 years, and this year will be the 40th for us, is we turn on the beacon on November 10th to honor the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald that went down in 1975. And this year is also the 50th anniversary for that tragic event as well. And so we light it in honor of the crew that passed away, and try to keep that in the forefront for everybody as well, and just kind of do it as a thing to memorialize them, and keep that history alive in front of people, so people know that Lake Superior is a beast that you need to treat with respect in every shape and form. So, but those are the three official times that we turn it on. We might turn it on a few other times here or there, for mainly just to make sure that everything's functioning properly like it should with the lighthouse, because it doesn't get used like it's supposed to be used as activated navigation. It's a museum. So
Yeah, that's cool though that you guys tie in that memorialization. You guys have the birthday of the lighthouse, and you're using it to celebrate and to further the historical reach of not just the lighthouse itself, but events that have happened on the lake. And all of us that have spent any amount of time on Lake Superior, she is definitely beautiful, but she is cruel. And, as you were saying that, it brought to mind, the gales of November, where I've seen your images and images of other photographers up there on the North Shore, where you guys have monster waves just slamming those rocks in the shorelines, and it is just it's beyond intimidating. Like I can't really say it more better than that.
yeah, it's definitely it's definitely terrifying, and as so quickly that it can change too. Like it's I thoroughly enjoy photographing the massive waves on Lake Superior. It's one of the funnest things to chase, next to chasing aurora, really, because you're like, oh, I can tell the northeast winds coming in, and it's going to be that way for a long time. And all right, so let's try to track this and figure out where to go. And the one time I was standing on a cliff taking a picture. It was actually here in the park again, and I was trying to do this cool video as a reel for for my Instagram page about being a Lake Superior photographer. You got to deal with a lot of waves and action and stuff. And I'd been shooting there for a long time, like a half hour, and just watching the waves come in. So I knew exactly, I had a good idea of how high they were coming and what was happening. And I wasn't getting sprayed with anything. And I go to finally do the video, as any kind of creator. I use creator in quotes because I'm definitely not an Instagram creator, but to do this video, and I'm doing this video, and I'm doing this my quick little introduction, and all of a sudden this wave comes up behind me and just splashes up against the rock face and comes up and like just drenches me
Oh no.
in water. And I'm just like, okay, yep, Lake Superior is telling me not to turn my back on it. Don't do that. Okay, I understand now. You don't have to do that again.
Yeah. Please don't splash me anymore.
No, I get it. I shouldn't have turned my back to you.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things you learn the more time you spend along the shoreline is it changes quickly. And those changes, I mean, sometimes, maybe it's not extreme, but when it is, man, those waves will come up, they'll sweep you right off the rocks, or, push you right into the lake, or countless other things. And just up the road from you guys there at, why can't I think of it now? Palisade Head. I've seen people shooting the waves there, and, in videos or photos, you can't really tell just how tall those cliff faces are. But when you've actually stood there and looked out over the lake, and you've seen how tall those cliffs are, and that those waves are, the splash is coming all the way up the side. That's wild.
Yeah, there was so before I got this job at Split Rock, and before I got into photography, there was two years in a row. I believe it was 17 and 18. and there was these big, massive windstorms that would come across the lake and really pummel the lake shore. And in one of the years, there was a North Shore landmark for photographers and stuff in Teddigooch State Park. Um, there was a massive rock pillar essentially, and that got knocked over in that storm. And in the same storm, my now maintenance guy that I've got to work with for the last few years, because they were open that day, and the waves were massive, they decided to close because the waves were hitting the cliff face on the lighthouse where the lighthouse is, and actually coming up and over the top of the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is on a 120-foot cliff, and the lighthouse itself is another 60 feet tall. So, and to prove that, I never believed it. Like when he was telling me the story, I'm like, no, they would. There's no way those waves would go above the lighthouse. He showed me a picture on his cell phone of that wave. There was a wave above the top of the tower, and you could see it. And it's not this massive 200-foot wave that's coming in. It's the wave hitting the rock face and then the spray going up and over. So that wave itself had to have been 15 to 20 feet high for that spray to get lifted up that high to come up. And those are massive storms. And I haven't personally experienced one of those living on site yet. I'm secretly hoping to, knowing how dangerous they are. But we've had the ones that we've had have been pretty massive too, where we're getting these 10-foot rollers coming in. And just so impressive to see and be a part of.
Yeah, when you see that out there, I mean, I've seen your photos, some of the videos you've shared where this nice, peaceful lake that just looks so calm and relaxing is suddenly awake. And when it's awake, it is very much so awake. And, like how we mentioned the Edmund Fitzgerald, that was another one of those Lake Superior storms that, the big rollers, they knocked her around, and that was that.
Yeah, it's like I said, don't ever turn your back on it. It's she'll tell you don't do it. She'll show you real quick. And it's not even that though. It's one of the things that does, I don't want to say it's the danger piece of it that draws me to it, but it's more the changing landscape. And that's why I do really like getting out in like subarctic weather. And these where you get these long stretches of the sub-zero temperatures, and the lake is always really calm when it's like that, but having the ice formations along the lake and being able to see how the atmosphere changes and be able to see that on a daily basis too is really impressive and really awesome and just unique. And when you walk out and you're on 10 inches of pure ice on on the shoreline, and it's slippery, but it's also -30 out, it's such a cool thing to experience.
Yeah, that's actually the last time I was there was February of 2021, I want to say. And the ice was just in every direction. It looked like you could walk out, just continuously walk into the lake. I mean, obviously, of course, that's a very bad plan, but for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
But when I was actually at Split Rock in the same spot that I was talking about earlier, that little bay area right in front of it, I actually thought that I was on snow, and I was just walking along. Everything was fine. And then I was like, hey, this is a pretty cool composition. I'm going to set up right here and get my shot going. And as I was sitting there kneeling, getting my camera out and everything, it made that crazy pop, like cable sound. And I stopped. I paused for a second. I was like, this isn't snow. And I started like brushing it away. I had spikes on my boots, so I had no idea. I started brushing it away, and sure enough, I was on the ice. And this other photographer, he came up, and he was probably about 30 feet away. He kind of looked at me, and he's like, what are you doing out there? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're on the ice, man. I was like, yeah, I'm starting to quickly gather this. I need to get back to safety.
Yeah, yeah. That could have been me yelling at you too. I don't.
I mean, it may have been. There was actually a picture shared. Um, I don't remember who or what the organization was, but I want to say it was an organization where um, me and this other photographer were actually back over on the shoreline, and I could tell it was me because I have this bright red Kool-Aid man coat, and
The photographer special, right?
oh yeah, got to make sure you stand out there. And I was like, hey, yeah, you could actually see my footprints from where I had wandered out and wandered back, and I was sitting there shooting with this other photographer. We shot the sunset and laughed about it, but you know, driving back to the hotel that night, I was like, definitely need to be a little bit more cautious about what I'm doing out there.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I was not at the lighthouse here. I was down at a different point south of Two Harbors. There the ice piles up on the shore and it creates these really awesome ice shardy comps and stuff. And I was walking along and I knew I was on the ice, but um, I all of a sudden I just stepped through and I stepped into the lake and I was like, holy crap, this is not good. It went up to like my ankle, but I had those big mucker boots on too, so I was definitely fine. Like I was prepared for it, but it was one of those moments where like, okay, yep, I have to remember, don't walk on the ice.
Yeah. Don't go out there. It looks like it's safe, but it is not. But it's one of the cool things about being here on Lake Superior and the four seasons that we get and the different opportunities, like you said earlier, finding those different compositions and moving around and incorporating history with your photography and having those opportunities is just incredible.
People always tell me, you must be so lucky, and I'm like, yeah, I do feel blessed, and I don't take it for granted either to live and work where I am. And you know, photography, I started out with it as a passion to help tell the history of the area. Like I wanted to take all these cool images in these spots where history happened and try to document it in a new way. And if you can combine those two, it's a great, so much more joy, and you get more in depth in the image and everything too. So it's just, I don't know, when you can make it work, it works really well.
Yeah. That's something that I actually like to do a lot too, is incorporate history into the photography piece. Like you mentioned, there's a bunch of rare earth minerals and all kinds of stuff in the region. When you're hiking, in my instance, I do a lot of hiking in the Upper Peninsula. When I'm hiking, find mine shafts and stuff like that all over the place in, along trails, or even when you're out bushwhacking, you'll come across something that's just a reminder of the history of these places and how they developed and how people literally came into the wilderness and were like, I'm going to live here and I'm going to make this into something awesome.
Yeah, that's the cool part about it. If you can really uncover it and try to tell that story, because then it's going to live on forever in the photo that you take and the story that you try to tell with it.
Yeah. For those that are interested in visiting Split Rock or doing any type of photography there, what are some important things that people should be aware of when they're there or planning their trip?
Yeah, so Split Rock Lighthouse. I work for the Minnesota Historical Society, and we manage the 25 acres that's directly around the lighthouse itself. The Minnesota DNR operates the 2,200 acres that surround our 25 acres. So it's a state park, really. Most of the time, you are going to be photographing in a state park, so you have to follow Minnesota DNR state park regulations. And really, what I've found for a lot of people is, if you have a question about doing something in a Minnesota state park, just call ahead. The park rangers are really friendly. They want to talk to you. There are some regulations, and there's also a lot of freedoms that you can do with it too. Here at the site, for the 25 acres that we manage, we do have open and close hours. We're like a business like that, so we're open at 10 a.m. and we close at 6 p.m. now in the summer. In the winter, it's a little bit different. But if anybody is ever interested in photographing up on the lighthouse grounds, we just ask that you call ahead and talk to me and can try to arrange something if we can. We can't always make things happen. But really, what I always tell people is you want to be down on the shore anyway in the state park, taking photos down there. That's where the real awesome stuff is, and the great views are down there. One thing, and we were talking about this before we started the show, was drones are a big issue here on the shore, specifically at Split Rock. I love drones. I'm a 107 pilot myself. I know you are too, Nick, and they're a great tool in a lot of photographers' handbag and arsenal for what you're doing, and they can expand your story. But we do have a policy at the Minnesota Historical Society that drones aren't allowed here. We don't let you fly them whenever you want. And the Minnesota DNR also has a similar policy where they don't allow drone flights in state parks. And a lot of times you can get around that by asking for permission. And you know the rules. I know the regulations. I know if I were to look on the AirAware app on my phone, it's going to say that you're clear to fly here, but you're not, because I control the ground where people would have to operate the drone flight from, and you cannot operate a drone on the property here. So you have to get permission to do that. And a lot of times what we ask is like, hey, if you call me up or send me an email and give me at least 3 to 4 or 5 days notice, I can make a flight happen for you. Because we have, and I talked about this earlier, we have 160,000 people that come to our site every year, and we'll have busy days where we don't need a drone flying around when I've got 1,500 people out on a small space. And so we just ask that people, if you want to make a drone flight, just plan it out. It's try to plan your week out. And I know for a lot of people, some people don't do that. Some people are like me and they're super planners and they're going to have everything down to what I got to do. But just call and ask. If I can make it work, I will make it work. If I can't, you got to respect it. And if you post something online that you flew a drone in the Split Rock State Park and didn't get permission, there's going to be people that are going to call you out on it. I might even be one of them. Be like, hey, I know you didn't get my permission to do it, so let's have a conversation about how we can do this in the right way next time. So
yeah. Similar to getting airspace clearance with you're using one of the apps or whatnot, and that ties into everything we've talked about with the historical significance, preservation, being respectful, and just keeping these places enjoyable. I know I've been to places in the past where you're just taking in this beautiful view, and all of a sudden you hear the bzzz in the background, and you look up and here's a drone ripping above 30, 40, 50 people. And yeah, it's one of those things that it's easier in this case. The saying usually goes, it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission. But in this case, it's definitely easier to just ask for permission, because I've seen it a few times where somebody will fly a drone there or do something that, they should have gotten permission for. And there is definitely people that will call them out and, even in Minnesota state parks, I've seen it where, or other state parks, the DNR controlled land that you were talking about, where they're flying it at Gooseberry or Tedagoosh or Shovel Point or what have you. It's good to know the rules before you go out there and just start flying around.
Well, and it's just to be respectful too. Like, yeah, you have every right to be here and to do stuff, but places that you go to visit have rules and regulations, and you should abide by those when you're doing it. And it's the same for, even if you're not flying a drone, just doing photography. Like if a place has closed hours because they're closed, you're not going to go and trespass on that property to get that shot. You shouldn't if you're an ethical photographer. And if somebody says, hey, you're not allowed to go there to do photography, then you shouldn't cross that line and do it. There's a lot of places in northern Minnesota that are public lands that you can go anywhere and take a photo and don't have to ask for permission. But you're going to do research to know that. Like, I always tell people too, I'm like, well, you wouldn't let me just barge into your house at 1 a.m. to take a picture, right? Like you're just going to somebody else's house. It might just be a business in that sense. And, we're not just going to let you take a picture because it's 1 a.m. and nobody else is here. There's rules around that. So,
Yeah. I mean, and that makes total sense. And I agree with the shots you're looking for down on the shoreline anyways, or at that little turnout up on the highway there that you can look over the trees. You have a perfect view of the lighthouse and you can just stop there and shoot from that area. And you've got some really cool splash pools and all that down there on the shoreline that you can catch neat reflections in, and just a
yeah,
beautiful park altogether.
I always tell people, and they don't believe me this, but it's like being up on the site by the lighthouse is actually the worst. It's a beautiful spot, but it's also very ugly from a photographic standpoint. Like there's not a lot of comps and that kind of stuff. It's cool to be up here and be close to stuff, but for a great sunrise, you need to be on the shore. For a sunset, same thing. You want to be on the shore. You want to get that epic shot. So you don't want to be up close to the building to not see it. So
Right, exactly. And that's something that I actually kind of figured out when I was there. It was either it was the trip I went in October. I walked right up to the lighthouse and grounds were open. It was midday. And I was walking around, I was looking at it, I was like, this is a really cool spot, but I don't know how I would tell the story of this lighthouse from 10 feet in front of it. Like
yeah,
I can shoot it super wide, but even then it's just going to be the lighthouse filling this entire frame. And what am I going to do?
yeah. And you're not going to get the water in it. You're not going to get much of the sky. It's just going to be a big brick lighthouse, which I love it. It's a beautiful lighthouse. But from a photography standpoint, you don't want to be down on the shore. It's where all the fun stuff is.
I agree. After having been there, I've certainly explored the options myself, and I couldn't agree more. Now, with your photography work, you mentioned that you started doing some workshops and that you've gotten into astrophotography. I understand you kind of work in a couple different genres of landscape astrophotography. Tell us some more about that.
Yeah. So when I was starting to get into photography during COVID, I started watching YouTube videos like, I don't know, a lot of people do, I'm assuming. And I saw some guy talking about taking a picture of the Milky Way and how awesome it was. And I kind of started looking at him like, if I can get into photography and I can take a picture like that, I'll know I've accomplished something, in this endeavor, because I wanted to set some goals for myself of like, okay, I need to work towards something because my day job is kind of a mess with COVID, and I need to be able to set some achievable goals for me. And um, yeah, I just kind of got into it and really started to love the night sky. And I when I remember I got my first big camera, my real camera was a Canon 5D Mark IV. It's a great camera. I still have it. Um, but I took a picture of the night sky and I kind of edited it down and I was like, I did it. I took a Milky Way image and it looks great and I can print it. It looks wonderful. Um, so that was a lot of fun. And kind of learning that process, and then just the general landscapes as well. It's something that you start with, and once again, yeah, I'm blessed to live at Split Rock, and I can go down to the shore for a sunrise very easily. I can go down there very quickly for a sunset. I've got a backyard that's a photographer's dream to go down and try to learn this stuff, and so learning how to do sunrise photography and photograph movement in water and all this stuff, and learn compositional techniques and stuff, and be able to combine all that together has been such a great journey for me. Um, but I really have really I get more excited lately about the astrophotography and how I can come up with unique compositions for that, and how I can you know find new techniques for editing and post processing, and then finding those unique locations that aren't the go-to for places, and how can I make this night sky image look really awesome along Lake Superior. A friend of mine was telling me, he's like, well, I need to go inland. I need to get more inland shots on tiny lakes and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, that's really cool, but I don't know. Lake Superior is pretty beautiful to me. I think I might just kind of try to make that my shtick. I think is just kind of you know astrophotography along Lake Superior. I think because it's just it's easy. It's a beautiful thing, and it combines a lot of stuff that I do love. So
Yeah. And that's something that I've loved for years myself is astrophotography and the different compositions and the different opportunities, the different stories you can tell with an astrophotography image where, you know, typically we think epic landscape scene, we think incredible sunrise, incredible sunset, skies full of color, et cetera, et cetera. But then you take that out and you add the night sky, adds a completely different mood, totally different dynamic to the image. It's amazing. And the shots that you've been sharing, your astrophotography shots have been really, really cool lately.
well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's been a fun spring this year trying to find the new comps and techniques, and learning how to use my star tracker a little bit better, which I've just absolutely fallen in love with on how to use it, how clean I can make the images, and the detail that you can pull out in it. Um, One of my favorite ones most recently too was I went up to a waterfall here and to get a Milky Way image, and I was so happy when it finally worked out because it's a shot I'd been dreaming of for a long time. To make that shot work and to tell that story of that waterfall and the night sky there was just a great thing. And it does help put things in perspective too when you're looking at it more of like you've got all these millions of stars out and you're looking at them and you really just you're like, okay, yep, I'm one of very small minute piece in this universe that we're that we're in. And I know that sounds really cliche in a sense, but it is pretty important to put yourself in that kind of perspective every once in a while, that you are a pretty tiny feature in this vast universe that we're in.
Yeah, it puts things into perspective and helps you just kind of realize that, hey, maybe that guy that cut you off or the person that took the last, whatever drink in the vending machine, maybe it's not as big of a deal as it seems to be. But
Yeah, it doesn't matter when you put yourself amongst those millions of stars, those little tiny insignificant little things in life.
yeah, you kind of realize or begin to realize just how many little miracles had to happen for quite literally everything that you, the people you know, the place you're in, just all these different things. You start thinking about it, and it's just like, wow, like how amazing.
Yeah, no, that's what I do love about that Astro stuff so much more. And even with the Aurora stuff, it's something that I've I've traveled to see. I've gone to Norway to see the Northern Lights. I've gone to Alaska to see the Northern Lights, and to see that kind of uh, an event, even once in your life, would be life changing for a lot of people. And to see like the natural world can actually do that is so amazing and mind blowing to me. These shapes and colors and the way things move all along the atmosphere. It's just like, wow, this is a really special place, and that I think it's, I've gone to a lot of great places for great landscapes and stuff. And like, this is really cool. And we need to protect this because it's unique and massive. But, Aurora and nightscapes to me really do epitomize the beauty of our world, and why it's so important for us to be good stewards of that and protect all of it. It's just really spectacular. It does put that more in perspective.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. Well, how can people find your work, learn more about your workshops, and get in contact?
Yeah, so I do have a website. It's hscrivenphoto.com. They can go there and they can see my work there. They can look me up on Facebook. I'm at Hayes Scriven Photography on Facebook, and I post there about 5 days a week. And then I got my Instagram page. It's Split Rock Keeper Hayes. It's there, and I do a lot of different stuff there as well. So yeah, I like I said, I post pretty consistently, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, but
Hey, isn't that the name of the game though?
yeah, pretty much. And then coming up here this summer, we've got a workshop at the Lighthouse that we're doing with another local North Shore photographer. We're doing a series of them, and I'm actually helping him out. It's with John Greger. For those that are known in Minnesota, John is the one leading the workshop, and we're teaching a bunch of those on nightscapes, black and white, sunrise, fall color stuff. John's an amazing teacher, an amazing photographer. So if you haven't seen his stuff, check that out. But that's through the Lighthouse itself. And then we've got here at the Lighthouse, we got a dark sky night that we're doing in conjunction with UMD, the university here in Duluth, where we're doing some more dark sky stuff there. And then the Bell Museum out of Minnesota, we're doing more night sky stuff with them. You see a theme going there. And then I've actually got a workshop that I'm teaching with a friend of mine, Nick Narog. We're doing that in September up here on the shore. We've got some spots open for that still. Last year, just to brag a little bit about it, when we had the workshop, we did get Aurora one of the nights, and it was amazing Aurora, kind of a spontaneous Aurora that we had here. And then we had 5 more nights in a row of clear skies for Milky Way, and it was just... I was telling my wife just the other day, because I was thinking about it, I said, that was the best week of my life. And she's like, really? Even maybe when we got married? I said, yeah, I was outside 5 nights in a row shooting astrophotography. She didn't like that response. But
yeah, I was going to say, you're treading dangerous water there, my friend.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man. I'll definitely include links to everything here in the show notes below so that people can check out your work, check out your workshops, come and visit the Lighthouse, learn more about it, and hopefully get out there and learn some more about Minnesota, the history, and get some great shots in the process.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate you jumping in, man. Thank you. Awesome photographer, awesome discussion. Thank you again for jumping on an episode with us, Hayes. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you check out his links in the show notes below and learn how you can get involved in a workshop or a tour of the Lighthouse. In next week's episode, we are going to be joined by Keith Blasky as we introduce a new type of episode, Experiences on the Lakes. Join Keith and I as we discuss some of our favorite moments on the lakes, in our adventures, and just as photographers in the Great Lakes region and beyond. Make sure you are subscribed and following along to stay up to date on the latest episodes, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.